Are you completely out of your mind? His voice was a raw, velvet abrasive against the sensitive shell of my ear, sending a violent shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the fever ravaging my veins. I trembled, pressing my spine against the cold obsidian wall, terrified of the intoxicating scent of cedar and impending storm radiating from him. Hugo Blackthorn, the Alpha King, leaned in closer, his golden eyes glowing in the absolute dark. "Breathe," he commanded softly, "and listen to me carefully. No one can know about tonight." The onyx spire was a fortress carved from the very bones of the mountain, a towering monument to the Blackthorn lineage. Tonight, it was illuminated by 1,000 crystal chandeliers, hosting the decennial royal conclave. It was a gathering of every alpha, beta, and dignitary across the 5 territories. It was also the absolute worst place on Earth for a late-blooming wolf to experience her first heat. I was 21, an anomaly in a society where most presented at 18. For years, the Pack Whispers had branded me a dud, a wolf with a human's mundane biology. I had accepted my fate, but 3 days ago, the fever had begun. Not a human flu, but a deep, resonant ache in the marrow of my bones, accompanied by a sudden, terrifying heightening of my senses. I had sought out an apothecary on the fringes of our territory, paying an exorbitant sum for a vial of bitter black suppressants. They were meant to mask the scent, to cool the blood. They were failing. "Delaney, you look like you're about to pass out," Arabella murmured, her perfectly manicured hand wrapping around my elbow. I flinched at her touch. Her skin felt like burning iron against mine. Arabella Pierce was supposedly my closest confidant, yet beneath her immaculate smiles and calculating blue eyes, there was a relentless ambition. She was a high-ranking beta, beautiful and sharp as shattered glass. Lately, I couldn't tell if she was trying to protect me or position me on a chessboard I couldn't see. "I'm fine, Ara," I lied, forcing my breathing to steady. "Just the altitude. And the crowds." "The crowds," she echoed, her gaze sweeping the grand ballroom. "Or the fact that Gavin Northgate hasn't taken his eyes off you since you walked in." I followed her gaze and immediately regretted it. Alpha Gavin Northgate of the Silver Pines leaned against a marble pillar across the room. He was classically handsome, with pale blonde hair and eyes like chipped ice, but his smile never reached them. He was known for his ruthlessness, his pack expansion, and his uncanny ability to ferret out weakness. When our eyes met, he raised his crystal glass in a mocking toast. A cold spike of dread pierced through my fever haze. "He's looking for leverage," Arabella said softly, leaning in so close I could smell the sickly sweet jasmine of her perfume. "And you, my sweet Delaney, are looking remarkably fragile." "I am not fragile," I snapped, pulling my arm away. But my pulse was hammering a frantic rhythm against my throat, and a wave of dizzying heat washed over me, blurring the edges of my vision. "Careful," Arabella whispered, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "If you stumble tonight, you won't just fall. You'll be devoured, especially with him watching." She didn't need to point. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet by 10 degrees, a heavy, suffocating aura settling over the crowd. The music faltered for a fraction of a second. Hugo Blackthorn had entered the hall. The Alpha King was a myth made flesh. He was a head taller than the largest alpha in the room, broad-shouldered and lethal, wrapped in impeccably tailored darkness. His hair was the color of midnight, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes a striking, terrifying amber swept over the room with the casual dominance of an apex predator. He didn't demand respect. His very existence commanded it. I tried to shrink behind a cluster of visiting dignitaries, praying to the moon goddess that the suppressants would hold. To experience an unsanctioned, unregistered heat in the presence of the Alpha King was a violation of ancient pack law. The punishment was exile, or worse, forced claiming by whoever found you first to stabilize the pack's dynamics. As Hugo descended the grand staircase, the crowd parted like the sea. For a terrifying, heart-stopping second, his amber gaze locked onto the cluster of people I was hiding behind. His nostrils flared infinitesimally. My breath hitched. "No," I prayed silently. "Please, no." I turned and bolted toward the grand balconies, desperate for the freezing mountain air, leaving Arabella staring after me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it concern? Or the triumphant realization that the prey was finally on the run? I didn't wait to find out. The fever was spiking, and the scent of wild orchids and burning sugar, the unmistakable scent of an omega in her first heat, was beginning to bleed through my skin. The night air was a sharp, biting relief. The balcony wrapped around the eastern wing of the spire, overlooking a sheer drop into a forest blanketed in thick, rolling fog. I leaned heavily against the intricately carved stone balustrade, gasping for air. My skin was flushed, my dress suddenly feeling like a suffocating second skin. I reached into the small beaded clutch hanging from my wrist, my trembling fingers searching for the small vial of suppressants. Just one more drop, just enough to get me through the next 3 hours until I could lock myself in my chambers. Hiding from the festivities so soon, little wolf? The voice slid through the dark like poison. I spun around, nearly dropping the vial. Gavin Northgate stepped out from the shadows of the velvet drapes, his pale eyes gleaming in the moonlight. He moved with a lazy, terrifying grace, stalking toward me. "Alpha Northgate," I managed to say, forcing a curtsy that felt more like a collapse. I was merely taking the air. The air in there is quite stifling, isn't it? He stopped just a few feet away, invading my personal space. The scent of frost and iron rolled off him, making my heightened senses scream in protest. So many alphas, so much posturing, it makes one sweat. He leaned in closer, his nose twitching. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his lips. "How interesting," Gavin murmured. "You smell like desperation, and something else, something extraordinarily sweet." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps it's the gardens below. I know the scent of every flower in this mountain range, Delaney," he whispered, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch was freezing, raising goosebumps on my overheated skin. "And you do not smell like a flower. You smell like an opportunity." He knew. He absolutely knew. If Gavin announced my state to the conclave, he could stake a claim on me right then and there. As a high-ranking alpha, no one would challenge him for an unregistered, unpresented female. I would become a pawn, a prize to breed into his expanding empire. "Please, step back," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Gavin's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, possessive hunger. Or what? Who is going to protect a packless little late bloomer? "You are slipping, Delaney. Your scent is getting stronger by the second. Surrender to me now, quietly, and I'll make sure you are treated like a queen in Silver Pines. Fight me, and I'll drag you out onto that ballroom floor, and let the beasts fight over the scraps." He lunged forward, his hand grasping my wrist with bone-crushing force. I opened my mouth to scream, but before the sound could leave my throat, the air around us shattered. It didn't just grow cold, it became utterly, suffocatingly heavy. The atmospheric pressure dropped so violently my ears popped. "Remove your hand from her, Northgate." The voice was low, devoid of shouting, yet it resonated with the force of an earthquake. Gavin froze, his grip on my wrist loosening slightly. We both turned our heads. Hugo Blackthorn stood in the archway. He didn't look angry. He looked absolutely, terrifyingly hollowed out by rage. The shadows of the balcony seemed to writhe and stretch toward him, reacting to his dominant aura. "My king," Gavin said smoothly, though I could feel the slight tremor in his fingers before he released me entirely. "I was merely keeping Lady Brooksford company. She seemed unwell." "She is a guest in my home," Hugo replied, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. The polished floorboards seemed to groan under his boots. "I will determine her wellness. Leave us." Gavin hesitated, his eyes darting between Hugo and me. He was calculating the odds, weighing the risk of challenging the Alpha King in his own domain. He bowed stiffly. "Of course. Enjoy the fresh air." As Gavin retreated into the ballroom, I slumped against the balustrade, my legs finally giving out. But before I could hit the ground, a pair of strong, blindingly hot arms caught me. Hugo pulled me flush against his chest. The scent of petrichor, ancient wood, and raw, electric power overwhelmed my senses. It didn't frighten me. Inexplicably, it anchored me. It was the only thing cutting through the fever. He buried his face into the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. I expected a snarl of disgust, an accusation of treason for bringing an unsanctioned heat into his court. Instead, a violent shudder ripped through his massive frame. "Goddess help me," Hugo breathed against my skin, his voice strained and hoarse. "You're burning alive." He didn't take me back through the ballroom. Instead, Hugo effortlessly lifted me into his arms, carrying me as if I weighed nothing. and moved swiftly toward a hidden iron door at the far end of the balcony. "Put me down," I gasped, weakly pushing against his solid chest. Every point of contact between our bodies felt like a branding iron. The heat was escalating, clawing at my sanity, urging my inner wolf to submit, to bare my neck. "You can't. The laws. Damn the laws," he growled, kicking the iron door open and striding into a dimly lit, narrow stone corridor. "If I let you walk back in there, they will tear you to pieces. Northgate is already plotting his claim. I can smell his intent." "Why are you doing this?" I sobbed, the emotional volatility of the heat finally breaking my composure. Tears hot as acid streamed down my face. "I'm a nobody. You should throw me in the dungeons. You're the king." He stopped walking. We were in the depths of the castle now, away from the music, away from the prying eyes. The silence was absolute, save for the ragged sound of my own breathing. Hugo looked down at me. The golden rings in his eyes were expanding, swallowing the amber, a clear sign of his inner wolf fighting for control. His jaw clenched so tight I thought the bone would snap. "Are you completely out of your mind?" His voice was a raw velvet abrasive against the sensitive shell of my ear, sending a violent shiver down my spine. I trembled, pressing my spine against the cold obsidian wall as he gently set my feet on the ground, but kept me pinned with his body. He leaned in closer, his golden eyes glowing in the absolute dark. "Breathe," he commanded softly, "and listen to me carefully. No one can know about tonight, not until I have secured your safety." "Why?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "Why do you care?" He reached up, his rough, calloused thumb gently wiping a tear from my cheek. The tenderness of the gesture, coming from a man known for his merciless rule, was more shocking than the heat itself. "Because, Delaney," he whispered, the sound carrying a weight of 1,000 unspoken oaths. "For the past 3 years, since the day you set foot in this territory, I have watched you. I watched them call you broken. I watched you endure, and the moment you walked into my hall tonight, my wolf nearly tore its way out of my chest." I stared at him, my mind unable to process his words through the thick haze of fever. "Your wolf? You are not a dud," Hugo said fiercely, his hands coming up to cut my face. "You are an omega, and you are mine." The word echoed in the narrow corridor. Mine. It wasn't a claim of ownership. It was a desperate revelation of fate. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in existence, had found his destined mate in the pack's outcast. Before I could respond, a sharp, piercing howl echoed from the floors above. It was a lockdown alarm. Hugo's head snapped up, his expression hardening into stone. "Northgate," he snarled. "He's triggered a security sweep. He's looking for you. He knows if he exposes you before I can announce you, the council will demand a trial." "What do we do?" Panic flared in my chest. If I was found here, alone with the king, reeking of heat, it would mean political ruin for him and a death sentence for me. "We hide you," Hugo said, grabbing my hand. His grip was firm, grounding, in the only place they cannot search. He dragged me deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, moving with preternatural speed. We bypassed the guest quarters, the armories and the libraries, ascending a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. Finally, we stopped before a massive set of double doors made of dark mahogany, reinforced with iron crests. The king's private chambers. He threw the doors open, pulled me inside, and slammed them shut, throwing the heavy deadbolts into place. He turned to face me, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a mixture of raw desire and terrifying protective instinct. The trap was set, and we were locked inside it together. The king's chambers were a stark contrast to the opulence of the ballroom. They were vast, dominated by a massive stone fireplace, walls lined with ancient leather-bound texts, and a colossal 4-poster bed draped in heavy furs. It smelled overwhelmingly of cedar, ozone, and power. To my fever-addled senses, it was pure intoxication. I collapsed onto a velvet chaise lounge near the fire, pulling my knees to my chest. The suppressants had completely failed. My skin felt like it was melting, and my inner wolf was clawing desperately at the surface, whining for the alpha, pacing like a caged beast across the room. Hugo had shed his formal jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing arms corded with muscle and scarred from countless battles. He refused to look at me, keeping a wide berth, gripping the edge of his mahogany desk until the wood cracked under his fingers. There are fresh clothes in the wardrobe, he said, his voice strained, tight with the effort of holding back his own instincts. Take that dress off. It's covered in your scent and the scent of the ballroom. I'll burn it. It will help mask your presence. I nodded numbly, stumbling to the wardrobe. I pulled out a soft, oversized linen shirt that belonged to him. As I shed the restrictive gown and pulled his shirt over my head, the scent of him enveloped me completely. It acted as a strange balm, soothing the frantic, painful edges of the heat, though it stoked the deep, aching desire into an inferno. When I emerged, looking like a drowned rat in a shirt that fell past my mid-thigh, Hugo finally looked at me. He stopped pacing. The air between us crackled with a magnetic, terrifying electricity. Come here, he ordered softly. I couldn't have disobeyed him if I tried. My feet moved of their own accord, drawing me to the center of the room. He reached out, pulling a heavy silver comb from his desk. Turn around. I did. He stepped behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his chest, but not touching me. Gently, meticulously, he began to comb the tangled mess of my hair. The simple, rhythmic action was devastatingly intimate. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly, the comb working through a knot. Why did you hide? I didn't know, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. I thought I was just sick, and then, when I realized what it was, I was terrified. The laws are clear, Hugo. The council will not accept an Omega Queen. They will say I am too weak. They will say you are compromised. The council, Hugo growled, the comb pausing, exists by my mercy. They do not dictate my fate, nor yours. Suddenly, a heavy, urgent knocking echoed against the mahogany doors. We both froze. Hugo's hand dropped, his body instantly shifting into a combative stance. He stepped in front of me, shielding me from the door. Sire, a muffled voice called out. It was Commander Thorne, the head of the King's Guard. Forgive the intrusion. We have a situation. Hugo cleared his throat, his voice returning to the icy, commanding tone of the Alpha King. Report. Alpha Northgate has filed an emergency grievance, Thorne shouted through the wood. He claims a rogue wolf in active heat has breached the conclave. He is demanding a full search of the spire. Furthermore, Beta Arabella Pierce has reported Lady Delaney Brooksford missing. She suggests Lady Brooksford may be the rogue in question. My blood ran cold. Arabella. She hadn't been trying to protect me. She was tracking me. She had fed me to the wolves. Northgate oversteps, Hugo replied smoothly, though his eyes were blazing with fury. The spire is my domain. No searches will be conducted without my direct warrant. Sire, the council has convened, Thorne warned, his tone apologetic but firm. They are citing the ancient pacts. If you refuse the search, Northgate will accuse you of harboring a threat to the pact's stability. He is mobilizing the Silver Pines guards in the courtyard. It was a coup. Gavin was using my heat to corner Hugo, forcing him to choose between his authority and the law. Hugo looked back at me, his jaw set in a grim line. Tell the council I will address them in the throne room in 10 minutes, he ordered Thorne, and tell Northgate that if his men take one step inside my halls, I will consider it an act of war. Yes, sire. Footsteps receded down the hall. Hugo turned to me, his expression unreadable. It's time to play the game. The 10 minutes felt like 10 seconds. Hugo moved with frightening efficiency. He splashed cold water on his face, donned a heavy, imposing mantle of black fur, and strapped a ceremonial silver broadsword to his hip. He looked every inch the ruthless warlord history painted him to be. You stay here, he instructed, placing his hands on my shoulders. Do not open the door for anyone. If Thorne comes back, you do not answer. You do not exist until I return. What are you going to do? I asked, gripping the lapels of his mantle. I am going to dismantle Gavin Northgate, he stated flatly. And then I am going to claim my mate before the entire realm. He kissed my forehead a searing, possessive brand and walked out, locking the heavy doors behind him. The click of the deadbolt felt like a death knell. Alone in the vast chamber, the heat surged back with a vengeance. I paced the floor, my mind racing. I couldn't just hide. If Hugo fought the council for me, there would be civil war. I needed to know what was happening. Driven by a mixture of fever and desperation, I remembered an old rumor about the spire. The king's chambers were connected to the throne room via a network of ventilation shafts and servant corridors. I scoured the walls until I found a tapestry depicting the first Blackthorn king. Behind it, precisely as the stories claimed, was a small, iron-grated access door. I squeezed through, crawling through the dusty, narrow passage. The sounds of the castle echoed weirdly in the dark, but soon I heard the distinct, booming acoustics of the grand throne room. I crept toward a small, ornate grate near the vaulted ceiling, peering down at the scene below. The room was packed. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Hugo sat upon the obsidian throne, looking down at the assembly with an expression of supreme boredom. Below him stood Gavin Northgate, looking triumphant. And beside him, to my shock, stood Arabella. "This is a mockery of our traditions, Your Grace." Gavin was projecting his voice for the entire room to hear. We all smelled it. An unsanctioned heat. A wild, unregistered omega in our midst. And yet, "You halt the search? You protect this abomination?" "I protect my home from unwarranted invasions by power-hungry upstarts," Hugo countered smoothly. Gavin sneered. "I have a witness. Beta Pierce, tell the king what you told me." Arabella stepped forward. She looked perfectly composed, her ice blue gown immaculate. She didn't look up at the throne, but kept her eyes fixed on Gavin. "It is true," Arabella said clearly. "Lady Delaney Brooksford was exhibiting signs of distress. I believe she was masking an onset heat, and—" She paused, drawing out the suspense. "I believe I know exactly where she went." My breath hitched in the dusty shaft. She was going to point them to the king's chambers. She was going to ruin him. "Speak, Beta," Gavin urged, practically vibrating with excitement. Arabella turned, looking directly at Gavin, a cold, predatory smile curving her lips. She fled into the eastern woods. I saw her slip through the postern gate. "And, Alpha Northgate, since you are so concerned with pack stability, perhaps you should know that before she ran, she mentioned you." Gavin frowned, confused by the sudden pivot. "Me?" "Yes," Arabella lied flawlessly, her voice echoing in the hall. "She said she was terrified of you, that you had threatened her in the gardens, that you intended to force a claim on her against the laws of the conclave." The room erupted into murmurs. Gavin's face went pale. "That is a lie. You treacherous little—" "Silence!" Hugo's voice cracked like thunder, silencing the room instantly. He stood up, descending the steps of the dais. "You accuse my guest of breaking the law, Northgate, while my own betas accuse you of attempted assault. This changes things. From my vantage point, I finally understood. Arabella wasn't betraying me. She was an opportunist, yes, but she wasn't Gavin's pawn. She had seen Gavin corner me on the balcony. She had seen Ugo intervene. She had deduced exactly what was happening and decided to place her bet on the winning horse. She was distracting Gavin, pointing him toward the woods to give Hugo the upper hand. Unpredictable, ruthless, and brilliant. But Gavin was not easily defeated. He narrowed his eyes, his chest expanding as he took a deep, deliberate breath. "She is not in the woods," Gavin snarled, his eyes snapping to the ceiling, scanning the architecture. "The scent is faint, masked by old magic and heavy wood, but it is here, in the stone, in the vents." My heart stopped. He was smelling the airflow from the shaft I was hiding in. Gavin pointed a trembling finger directly toward the grand crest above the throne, right where my grate was hidden. "She is here. The king is hiding the Omega." Chaos erupted. Council members shouted. Guards drew their weapons, and Gavin lunged forward, intending to scale the dais and tear into the walls himself. I couldn't stay hidden. If they found me cowering in the walls like a rat, they would brand Hugo a liar and a deceiver. He would lose the respect of his pack, and Gavin would incite a riot. I had to face them. I had to face my nature. I kicked the iron grate with both feet. It was old and rusted, and with a screech of tearing metal it gave way, clattering to the marble floor below. The entire room went dead silent. I crawled out of the shaft, dropping down onto the wide ledge behind the throne. I was a mess covered in dust, wearing nothing but the Alpha King's oversized linen shirt, my hair wild, my eyes burning with fever. But as I stood up, looking down at the sea of hostile faces, the fear evaporated, replaced by a strange, fiery calm. The Omega instinct, the deep primal power of the matriarch, awoke within me. "I am here," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence it carried to every corner of the room. Gavin's eyes widened in victorious glee. You see? He harbors the outlaw. Arrest them both. He took a step up the dais. Hugo didn't draw his sword. He didn't shout. He simply moved. In a blur of motion, Hugo was standing between me and the rest of the world. He unleashed his full aura. It wasn't just dominance. It was absolute, crushing sovereignty. Several weaker wolves in the front rows fell to their knees, clutching their chests, unable to breathe under the weight of his presence. Even Gavin staggered backward, his triumphant sneer turning into a grimace of physical pain. You will not speak to her, Hugo commanded, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. You will not look at her. You will not breathe in her direction. She is an unregistered Omega. Gavin choked out, fighting against the suffocating pressure of Hugo's aura. The law demands. I am the law, Hugo roared, the sound shattering one of the stained glass windows high above. He turned around, facing me. In front of the council, in front of his enemies, the Alpha King dropped to one knee. A collective gasp echoed through the hall. Kings did not kneel. Hugo took my trembling hand in his. His golden eyes were soft, filled with a desperate, burning adoration that stripped away all his defenses. Delaney Brooksford, he said, his voice carrying the weight of destiny. I recognize you. I claim you not by force, but by the decree of the moon goddess. You are my equal. You are my mate. You are the queen of the Blackthorn territory. And from this day forward, any man who questions your legitimacy will answer to my blade. He pressed his lips to my knuckles. A surge of energy, warm and brilliant, rushed through my veins. The agonizing fever of the heat didn't vanish, but it shifted, aligning with his energy, turning from a chaotic storm into a steady, powerful rhythm. The bond snapped into place, a tether of light binding our souls together. I looked down at him, my heart overflowing. I looked past him, to Arabella, who offered a small, sly nod of respect, and then to Gavin, who was pale, broken, and utterly defeated. The council members were already sinking to their knees, bowing in submission to their new queen. I squeezed Hugo's hand, pulling him gently to his feet. I stepped into his side, letting the scent of cedar and rain wash over me, completely unafraid. Let them see, I whispered to him, a smile playing on my lips. No one needs to keep tonight a secret. Hugo smiled, a terrifying, beautiful sight, and pulled me into his arms. The dawn broke over the onyx spire, painting the mountain in hues of violent crimson and soft gold. The conclave that had begun in deception ended in absolute unity, bound by the undeniable power of a true mate bond. Delaney went from the pack's forgotten shadow to its beating heart, and the ruthless Alpha King finally found the one soul capable of calming his internal storm. Their reign was not born in the light of tradition, but forged in the desperate, beautiful dark of a hidden truth. If this tale of hidden desires, political intrigue, and fated mates kept you on the edge of your seat, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more immersive cinematic stories. Let us know in the comments, would you have trusted Arabella's unpredictable loyalty? Until next time, let the moonlight guide you.